In Venezuela, tens of thousands of demonstrators, at least, have taken to the streets of the nation's capital in what they're calling the takeover of Caracas. They want authorities to allow a recall vote to try to remove President Nicolás Maduro from power. Many blame him for the country's massive economic problems. A number of pro-government supporters have also been holding their own counter-demonstrations. Well, earlier I sat down with Michael Schifter. He's the president of the Inter-American Dialogue. Michael, first of all, a sense of the size of these protests, because I've been reading reports that there were something like 1 million people on the streets of Caracas today.
Well, the opposition claims there are 1 million people. The government says there are 30,000. I think it's probably closer to 1 million, but clearly each side wants to promote their own estimate of how much. But they're significant. You could see by the pictures there's very, very significant mobilization. Right.
Let's put this in context. How bad is the economic situation in Venezuela at the moment?
I think it's hard to overstate. Inflation over 700% a year. Massive shortages of basic foods. The economy is contracting by 8%. This is a profound economic crisis. It's hard to think of anything comparable in recent history in Latin America.
Okay, so will these protests change anything?
Well, the idea is that they're going to mount pressure against the government to accept this recall referendum. Opposition would collect signatures.
Which ought to be happening,
which
right?
is constitutionally provided. And the government says it will happen. They just want it to happen next year. If it happens next year, then the vice president takes over if the president Maduro is recalled. And of course, the government continues because the vice president will be part of the government from Chavismo. So what the opposition wants is for the recall referendum to take place, but in 2016, not 2017.
I mean, there's only a few months left. Do you think they'll succeed?
Well, it's going to be very difficult. The government holds a lot of cards. They have a lot of power, and they're saying, you know, we need time to review the signatures. There are bureaucratic problems, and so their tactic is to delay, and these marches are designed to really ramp up the pressure.
I was in Venezuela for Hugo Chávez's funeral, and one thing that struck me was how ardent the support for him was. That doesn't seem to have been the case for Nicolás Maduro. Is that because Maduro suffers from a lack of charisma, political savvy, or is it because the oil price has plummeted and Venezuela's economy has got much worse?
It's a combination. He doesn't have the money, he doesn't have political skills that Chávez had, and he certainly doesn't have the charisma that Chávez had. And so he is in big trouble. And I think by every account, if the recall referendum were held, he would lose overwhelmingly. And that's why the government is trying to dig in and trying to prevent this from happening.
And what could given the collapse in the oil price and Venezuela's dependence on the oil price, which of course Hugo Chávez didn't have, the oil price was much higher, could he have handled things better economically?
I think he can. I think it's very difficult politically because there are a lot of different pressures and the government is very fractured. But clearly he could have pursued some economic policies that made sense. There are tremendous distortions. The exchange rate is completely out of whack. And he could have done some things, but it was very, very political. It's very difficult politically for him to do that. His economic advisors haven't been of the highest quality. So.
And where does the opposition to him come from? All walks of society, or is it a particular group?
Well, clearly from the middle class, but the poor are suffering tremendously. The poor have become disillusioned with Maduro. They're very critical of the government. They reject the government, and they want to change in the government. But the government doesn't want to give power. They've been in power since 1999 when Hugo Chávez came to office.
Okay, Michael Schifter, thanks very much for coming in.